Welcome to the Misophonia Podcast. This is Season 7, Episode 7. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have misophonia. This week I'm talking to Paige and her family, Dad Michael and Mom Kelly. Paige is starting high school, and we talk about the family's experience so far dealing with misophonia. It's been quite a journey, but Paige's parents have been determined to find solutions and coping methods for Paige. The family has also been part of some major advocacy projects in their hometown, including Halloween and Christmas fundraisers and Misophonia Awareness campaigns in partnership with their mayor. After the show, let me know what you think as always. My email is hello@misophoniapodcast.com or find me on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. And please head over to leave a quick review or rating wherever you listen to the show. It helps drive us up in the algorithms and reach more misophones. Now, a few of my usual announcements. I want to thank the incredible ongoing support of our Patreon supporters. And if you feel like contributing, you can find out about the various levels at patreon.com/misophoniapodcast. And I want to mention that you can pre-order advanced copies of a book that Dr. Jane Gregory from Oxford and I did called Sounds Like Misophonia. This will be coming out this fall from Bloomsbury Publishers, and it's getting very close now. You can find pre-order links in the show notes or on my social pages. And they have Amazon affiliate codes, but you can also get them from actually anywhere you find books. This episode is also sponsored by my personal journaling app that I developed for iOS and Android called Basil. Basil provides AI-powered insights into your journal entries. So you can write a journal entry, it'll summarize it for you, and then the next day it will prompt you with a customized prompt based on your recent entries to try to guide you in your journey. You can find links to the show notes. It's basically hellobasil.com. All right, now here's my conversation with Paige, Michael, and Kelly. Paige, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here. We also actually have Michael, I think your father here as well. Yeah, great to have all you on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yes, sorry, I forgot to mention we also have Kelly. Anyone is welcome to speak. I'd love to hear, I think from anyone in the family, because as we all know, it affects the whole family. So I'm sure everyone has a story to tell. But I guess, starting with Paige. Do you want to just kind of tell us a little bit about who you are, where you are, what you do?
Well, I'm Paige, and I'm going into high school. And then I got diagnosed with misophonia, I think it was 2021.
Yeah. Gotcha. And was that like a, kind of a long time coming when did kind of the signs start for you?
I started noticing it a lot during COVID. Just like eating at the dinner table, just little noises, especially my mom. I noticed the way she eats. Little things like that would kind of start to bother me. And then as lockdown, as we were kind of at home the whole time, it just started to get worse.
Yep.
I think just being around everyone and everything just kind of started to escalate.
Yeah, it's kind of rough because I guess around COVID you would have been, and if you're going into high school, that would have been around kind of the sweet spot of when it seems to start for most people. Did you notice, did you have any clue, maybe thinking back, any memories from like before COVID? Maybe your parents might remember something too. I'm just curious.
I do remember a little bit before, same thing with my mom, and just little things like the way she would drink and just like if she was having a piece of candy. I remember that, but that's all I remember so far of that far back.
Yeah. I remember there were things that Paige handled differently than her other daughter. We have an older daughter, and not in a bad way or an incorrect way, but just differently. And looking back on it with hindsight now, we didn't find out until we were getting her treated for the misophonia that she also had aspects of OCD and which is very common. And at the time we just thought she was really, really organized. And she had a particular way she liked to do things, and she liked order and things, set up schedule wise. And she was like that since she was, in preschool. We would have problems with her if you changed a plan or changed an outfit.
Mm.
And we just thought that was her
Mm-hmm.
personality. And looking back on it now, we can see where those little hints of OCD, you know, type personality traits were always there. And we just never knew it until we found the word misophonia online.
Right. So I guess knowing that were you diagnosed with the OCD before misophonia, Paige?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was diagnosed with anxiety and OCD. I think a couple months before.
Oh, okay.
And when
Gotcha.
she says diagnosed, it wasn't medically diagnosed. It was
Oh yeah.
Paige
On the
recognized it.
internet.
We
Yeah.
we
Hmm.
were struggling to find out what it was, and Paige would have these emotional reactions to the dinner table, not liking certain sounds, and it was causing arguments. Well, Paige, we're doing everything we can, what more?
Yeah.
Because we'd never heard of this thing. And
Yeah.
it just didn't make sense that this was just anxiety, that it was just OCD. So I'm always of the idea that there's nothing new under the sun. So Paige couldn't be the first person to go through this. So I
Yeah.
hopped online and just started searching severe reactions to sounds, anger at dinner table, and just trying to see if anybody had found anything like this and dealt with it. I was looking more for like concrete solutions, like what did you actually do? Did you have one person eat separately at a separate time? That's what I was looking for. Was just real life, tips and tricks. And then we found a blog where a woman was detailing her experiences in lockdown with her boyfriend. And I
Mm-hmm.
started
Mm-hmm.
reading it, and you could have taken that woman's name out and put Paige in there. And at the
Yeah.
time, Paige would hide in her room to be away from us. And I texted her and I said, I think I found something. And she came out, and I remember it like it happened yesterday. She was standing on our second floor looking down at me, and I read this woman's story. And Paige said, Dad, that's my life.
Wow. Yeah. 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 That's how a lot of us feel. And then we go down the rabbit hole of like doing all this research and finding many stories. But that's great that you were able to do that and find that. So you're searching for severe reaction to sound. Yeah, I'm always curious kind of what people search for. Um, but it sounds like Paige, were your reactions at the dinner table, um, they ended up you were able to you basically you left the dinner table at some point. Was that kind of your
Hmm.
common routine, I guess?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Towards the beginning, like when it first started, the reactions were nowhere near how they were like right now if I were to hear them or how it was maybe a year ago.
Mm,
I mean, it started off I would leave, but it wasn't as severe as it is.
uh-huh. So it's gotten worse now.
I mean, I haven't like heard them eat in so long because I've been so
Y-
separate.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But I know
Gotcha.
like a year and a half ago, if I were to hear them, it would be so much worse than how it was.
Yeah. Was it a lot of also before the leaving was well, so you would sit down at the table, right? So you would start
Hmm.
by sitting down, and did you know that something was going to come, or a lot of us kind of we forget, we just kind of sit down, and then oh yeah, I got misophonia, then we want to leave.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, kind of like how the routine was for you, like.
Yeah. Before we knew about it, I would just sit down and I kind of expected something to happen,
Mm,
but I still kind of thought it was my problem. So I didn't really like
right.
realize it. So I would most of the time just start sitting down and kind of already think about it, but then I would just leave.
And she's
So
incredibly
mhm.
stubborn and headstrong. So
Yeah.
if Paige
Yeah.
has a bump in the road, she doesn't change directions. She plows through the bump, or she
Hmm.
smashes it down to flatten it for everybody else. So
Hmm.
we to this day have to tell Paige, you don't need to fight through this. If you're having a problem, take a
Ah,
break, step away.
so
Paige,
your
she's
personality, yeah, yeah, yeah.
she's like a Marine. She wants to plow through it. So I'm sure long before we knew there was a problem, she was white knuckling it through many dinners.
Ah,
Hmm.
okay, interesting. So your instinct was to this is my problem. I'm just gonna try to live through this as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
What about at like school? Were you also triggered at school?
When it first started, no, not at all, actually. I didn't, there was nothing really going on at school. It
Well,
was
I guess with
mainly just
COVID, you
sounds at
weren't at
home.
school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So there was nothing at school, even because it started in probably like fifth grade, the end of fifth grade. And then in sixth grade, I still didn't
Mm,
have anything. But then that's when I had stuff in seventh grade.
Gotcha. Oh, what do you mean
So on the
having stuff
parental side,
like?
we knew this was happening during lockdown,
Yeah.
and knowing she was eventually going back to class, we were, you know, terrified of how that was gonna play out,
Yeah.
because we just knew how it was at home, and it was bad. It was really, really bad. We didn't know how to help her. She'd be in her room screaming, "Help me! What do I do? What do I do?" And
Mm,
I couldn't hold her, couldn't touch her. My voice
right.
would set her off, so I couldn't calm her down.
Yeah.
I think my wife went about 2 months with hardly talking to Paige because her voice was an instant
Mm,
trigger to Paige.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did it did did parts of it subside then? I mean, you're able to hear your parents' voice, I'm just curious. Obviously, you haven't eaten around them
Um,
very much.
yeah, I haven't eaten around them since, I don't know, probably 2020, I think. But I
Mm,
think
mm,
probably because of the medicine, and
mm,
I'm not so fed up by the time I'm already like talking to them. I'm not dealing with what, well, I'm not eating around them, so I'm not hearing as much. So I think I have a little bit more of, I'm able to listen to them, and it doesn't seem as bad as it was. Maybe probably because the medicine is helping a lot.
yeah, maybe your nervous system isn't so riled up.
I was
Hmm.
keeping a
Um,
journal, just writing notes down in my phone a little bit, and I remember exactly when it changed for us. Paige
mhm,
was having, if her misophonic reaction is on a scale of 1 to 10, she was having 12s multiple
mm,
times a day.
mm,
It would just be me saying the wrong word or making the wrong sound, because at the time we didn't know triggers yet. We didn't know what it was.
yeah.
And it was an instant off the charts. Paige had this adrenaline dump and rage, and she didn't know how to get rid of it.
Mhm,
And then it just so happened with school that there was like a 3 day weekend with teacher, institute days. And then there was like 2 or 3 snow days we had.
Hmm.
So Paige, just by happenstance, happened to have this 6 day break. And at that
mhm,
time, school was a big problem because she couldn't do homework at night. If she needed help, I couldn't talk to her. We'd have to play white noise or brown noise, drowning me
huh,
out. We even
right.
talked about learning sign language because I didn't know how I'd help her
Wow.
with homework.
Hmm.
So she
Yeah.
had this 6 day break. And we went from having daily off the chart explosions to she went 2 days without one, then 3 days, then
Mhm,
4 days. This was before the medicine started.
Yeah.
So
mhm,
we knew right then, oh, this has stress has a huge impact on this because the only thing that's changed is her stress levels. We're still
huh,
making the
Yeah.
same mistakes here and there. The only thing
yeah.
that changed was her stress levels with school. And it was the
And
next. I'm sorry, go ahead, Paige.
I know the anxiety was pretty bad too then in school, because I was always, my fear was I was worried that I was going to throw up or be around someone throwing up, and so that's probably why I was so much less stressed when I was at home, because I wasn't
Mhm,
having to worry about that at school. So I think that with the lower stress, I was not as on edge, I think.
gotcha. So,
And then,
yeah, so
sorry.
yeah, no, I was gonna say, so, you've mentioned medicine a few times, so at some point, it sounds like you went to a doctor, hopefully got medicine
Well,
from a
yeah,
doctor,
we
and
changed therapists a couple times because the
yeah.
first therapist wanted to do exposure therapy,
Ooh,
and
no.
I explained to her. I said, "Well, have you heard of misophonia before?" And well, that was the biggest gut punch. Was that night we found that article? I thought, cool, we have a name. We know what it is. Excellent.
Right.
Now tomorrow we're going to go down to the misophonia clinic, and we're going to get some anti-misophonia medication, and we'll be good in
Right.
a week.
Yeah.
So the next day I looked up, I go, okay, treatment for misophonia. And that was where I found I think it's the Misophonia Institute, or the
Mhm.
Misophonia website, where it lists worldwide providers. And there were
Right.
eight worldwide.
Yeah.
And we talked to Paige was seeing a therapist at the time for the anxiety, and told her about this. And she said, wait, it's miso what? And I
Yeah,
thought,
yeah.
oh, that's not a good sign.
So did they suggest the exposure therapy? Because I've heard exposure
She
therapy is
did.
used
Yeah.
for OCD, so,
That woman
people
actually wanted to come into our home
uh,
and have us
Hmm.
perform noises in front
oh
of Paige
god.
to get her over
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
that's
so we
quite
said
archaic.
no, next. And
Yeah.
Paige ended up, we found another person that dealt with us. Well, first we went on a waiting list that was 2 years to see one
Ooh,
psychiatrist, to see one
oh, okay.
psychologist.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we found help for Paige with her OCD and anxiety, and she was on a small medicated dose for that, and it was apples and oranges. It was night and day. The
Okay,
misophonia
so
didn't go away, but
yeah,
knock on wood, we haven't had one of those number 12 explosions, I don't think,
yeah,
since then.
yeah. That's
Actually,
interesting. Yeah, go on.
I yeah, definitely not as. I haven't had one that bad in so long.
Yeah, it seems like yeah, it seems like in this case, I mean, yeah, a lot of people with misophonia obviously, as like in your case, have comorbid conditions like the anxiety and OCD, and yeah, they're I mean they're obviously they're separate, but they do affect each other as
Hmm.
as you've learned, and the stress does as
Yeah.
well. So that's interesting to hear, like well, very clearly in your case that reducing anxiety didn't, obviously it's not going to totally get rid of the misophonia because it's a different beast, but it
Yeah.
definitely does reduce it because you are not as stressed.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm. And then, so how long ago was that?
Um, I think probably that was probably like a year and a half ago, I think.
Okay. And since then, yeah, have you obviously you've been quite involved in misophonia advocacy. I'm just curious, were you able to finally get to a therapist that maybe specializes in misophonia
Yeah,
or anything?
we just um Dad, do you remember when we started seeing Saren? When was that?
I, I I'm terrible on dates, Paige. It could have been 6 months ago or 7 years.
I think that was about a year ago. I started I started seeing a doctor. She she had some like degree or something where she knew what was it, Dad? I don't know what it was where she knew something about misophonia.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So they treated OCD and they were familiar with misophonia.
Hmm.
That's what it was. Yeah.
It was like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I found one therapist that definitely worked with OCD, and then they had an offshoot office, and that person had another office. So we ended up finding somebody that it was the first time we'd heard somebody say, "Oh yeah, I know what misophonia is."
Ah,
And they were
Hmm.
trying things that it wasn't exactly exposure therapy, but it was giving Paige coping skills, and Paige was still pretty uncomfortable with it. And I remember at one point, Paige and I were in the office. They would teach Paige to hyper focus on something, and and I
Well,
remember at
yeah.
one point she had me in the office wanting me to play cards or something or chew gum while Paige was playing cards with her. And I asked her the question. I said my concern. I got okay. I don't really get this. If it's an instantaneous reaction, where in there does Paige have time to perform these,
yeah.
these coping skills?
And I
And
told
she,
her that too, and yeah. Sorry.
yeah, I no, no, not, absolutely. I said, when does she have time then? If it's instantaneous, that's what I'm not understanding. And she kind of looked at me and she said, "But is it really instantaneous?" And I remember looking at Paige, and we're both like, "Oh my god!" I
Did she
said,
explain
"Yes,
that statement?
it's instantaneous. It's."
Hmm.
And she said it
And
again.
that's
She
not.
goes, "But is it really?" And I said, "Let me explain it to you." And I went through something that had just happened the night before. I said, "My
Yeah.
two daughters, my wife was working. We were laughing and joking, having a great night. They were just going to bed. Everybody was fine. The night was almost over. I leaned over and I made a sound when I was telling my oldest daughter good night. Paige went instantly screaming and crying. I said, "So it's instant." And I knew right then, I don't care what they say, they don't know what misophonia is. And I remember I went out to the car and called my wife and I said, "We can't keep seeing this. We have to go somewhere else."
Do you
And
know
that
what
was
they
the
were
woman that kept saying
implying?
the goal was to get Paige back to the dinner table.
Oh, okay. Do you know what they were
And
implying by that? By it's not that maybe it was um I don't know, like premeditated almost,
No, that it was a
or
slow build, that
a
when
slow
Paige
build.
was
Okay. Yeah.
exposed to a trigger, she was to recognize it was happening and then calm it before it got out of control,
Yeah.
which to
Okay.
me means you
and
understand it as a control issue.
Right. Right.
It's not
It
anything you can
seems like a
control.
control issue. It's a rookie mistake.
Right.
and Dad, Mom was there for most of it though, but she would, if you weren't there, she would have Mom come in and chew gum there, and she would just say, "Okay, let's play Uno," and then focus
Oh
on I don't
my
know like the
god.
cars,
And
and then
we kept
I would do
asking.
that, and I would be crying. I'd be sitting there sobbing and then whenever we would be done, I'd say like I don't want to do that again. That was really hard. And then the next time, then I had to sit outside with her, and she would chew gum for like 45 minutes, just me sitting outside listening to her chew gum and then trying to focus on like the birds that I can barely hear.
Yeah, yeah. That's straight up ignorant exposure therapy.
And see,
I'm
and as a
glad you
parent
left.
hearing this, it kills me to know
Mm-hmm.
I subjected her to that. But we
Well,
asked
yeah,
over and over,
yeah,
we're
yeah.
not
You didn't
doing
know.
exposure therapy, correct? And they said, no, it's not exposure therapy. And I
We
forget the
didn't
term
know.
for it. It was a different type of
Yeah, there's I don't know, acceptance and commitment kind of
yeah,
therapy.
something
I don't know
like
if that
that.
was that. There's also I mean there are also ways for if it's like client or person controlled, not exposing yourself, but maybe kind of like playing with how you interpret the sound a little differently. So kind of listening to something and then just in your mind, just kind of thinking of it as maybe being another type of sound as the source, or trying to play with the sound, but you are in control. Like you can leave. You're not at the whim of a therapist who's subjecting you to this stuff. So there are ways to kind of like introduce sounds to see if you can kind of reinterpret them. But this sounds like it was straight up like ignorant
The
exposure
way they
therapy.
explained it to me was that exposure therapy works like with the fear of heights. You can stand in a book, then you can stand on a step, then you can stand on two steps,
Oh
so on and
yeah,
so on. And
yep,
eventually you can fly in a plane, you're cured. They know that doesn't work with misophonia, obviously. So what they
right,
said this is instead, it's teaching coping strategies, but they need to be in that frame of mind to practice coping when it happens, because you have to face the fact that a trigger is going to take place. So now what do you do? So they were
right.
trying to control the situation and gently, I almost said expose, gently expose Paige to different triggers and then teach her how to cope with it once it happened.
That's rational to think that way, yeah.
Yeah,
But
I
if you
understand the
don't have good
concept.
coping, yeah. But it sounds like they didn't really give you any coping skills. It was just like sit there and concentrate. Try to concentrate was what they were trying to get you to do without
Because I
really
remember I
giving you
could
any
tell her,
coping
I said,
skills.
if Paige could concentrate on the coping skill, she could focus in class and not have
Yeah,
to leave. The whole concept is her fight or
we,
flight has been triggered.
yeah,
She can't
yeah,
concentrate.
yep.
So to counteract that, she needs to concentrate.
Right, right. I mean, that's part that makes no sense. I think if that person had coping skills to offer, um, that would be helpful. Um, let's not talk about her anymore. She's making me angry. But 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 yeah, did you glad you guys recognized that. Did you move on? Did you find anybody else after that? I'm curious.
Yes, I went out to the
Yeah,
car that night,
yeah,
and my wife is. I mean, if you ever need anybody to do anything for you or run something, my
all
wife
the
is the one to
time.
do it. I
Okay.
went out to the car and said, we can't stay here. We can't keep seeing this.
Yeah.
They don't
I'm
really
selective.
understand it. And I think it was within 2 weeks. Kelly had us set up with a Zoom meeting with the psychologist that we'd been on a 2 year wait for. So
Mm-hmm.
she somehow finagled that within 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time I remember sitting there with my wife, and I looked at her and I said, somebody's telling us about misophonia for the first time. We're not
Yeah.
informing a doctor.
Yeah. That's huge. Um. So, and how did that? Do you want to talk about kind of how that process has gone? Are you still with this psychologist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been seeing each other, I think it's probably been like 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going really good. And she knows not to do exposures. And she's given me so much to work on and everything. And it's going really good so far.
Could I ask where she's based without revealing any names? So I'll cut it out because I think
Um,
I know
Uh,
most of them. So.
where is
Hinsdale
it
or
at?
Yorktown.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I have no idea then who this person is. Okay, cool.
It's in Hinsdale.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess yeah, I'd love to hear kind of like how what she's helping you with.
We've mainly been working on trying to figure out the difference of what's anxiety, what's OCD, and what's
Oh yeah.
misophonia. Because I notice all of them together. Because then I have anxiety about anticipating misophonia,
Mm-hmm.
which then triggers the OCD. So we've been working a lot on trying to figure out which is which and how to tell, which is pretty
Right.
hard, but I think once I get that, I think it might be a good thing to know.
That's a really, yeah, I've heard that's a really important. It's a really interesting approach, and I think important because yeah, they get so quickly mixed up or
Mhm.
confused, especially the outside world. But I think it's especially important for us to kind of realize that.
Mhm.
Um, Interesting. Okay. And then does she have a kind of a plan as to kind of like kind of next steps, kind of how it's going to evolve?
Um, I know what we've really just been focusing on right now is just we've just started talking about what the plans are for high school,
Yeah.
and we haven't really talked too much about it, but just kind of brought it up at least and talked about what's making me anxious about it and maybe ways I can take breaks. But we don't really. She doesn't have a. I don't think she has a full plan yet. We're just kind of working on high school right now.
Are you planning to maybe communicate misophonia to the high school, like potentially?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had one or I think it was one or two meetings with my guidance counselor, and then I think it was the vice principal
Oh, okay. How did that
to
go?
kind of talk about it. It was good.
Okay,
Dad, I
cool.
think you and Mom were on it, right?
Yeah, well, Paige did a presentation at the junior high to inform her eighth grade class about misophonia. They did a whole awareness week there, and then it culminated with Paige doing a presentation where she gave a speech to her class,
Mhm.
and divulged the fact that she had this diagnosis. And the high school heard about it, and at one point had mentioned having Paige come talk to the staff there because they had another student that might have
Yes.
had this. So
That's
Paige was
amazing.
really interested in doing that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've been trying to get in touch with my kids' school district counselors too to at least get make sure that they're aware so that they can be on the lookout because I think that'll help a lot of people if schools and administrations are aware. But yeah, I definitely wanted to get to the your eighth grade presentation, so I'm glad you brought it up. I think that's amazing. You want to talk a little bit about yeah the presentation and how that evolved into the awareness week and whatnot?
Mhm. I remember there was. It was. I'm trying to think. It was sometime in like October, and we were already working on so much in class and just it wasn't working with me just
Mm,
leaving, and the teachers weren't even they were aware but they weren't as they were at the end of the year.
right.
So I remember I called my dad and I was in the office and I was just talking about it, and right when my dad brought it up and he said like what would you think about maybe bringing it up or like letting the kids know, because none of the people would be coming up to me asking me why I'm leaving, and then
Yeah.
I felt like it would even just be easier and maybe people who cared at all would at least try to do something to help. And then we just started getting in contact with my vice principal. And Dad, what did you? I don't remember what you talked
Well,
about with Mr. Perillo to set that
it
up.
was coming. It was culminating. It was getting to a point where it was unmanageable because Paige was coming home, calling us every day, 3 times a
Mm,
week, maybe 4 times
Hmm.
a week, because she'd be burned out. She'd had too many triggers and she just couldn't take it.
yep.
And I, her teachers have all the junior high. We could not have been more grateful. Can't be more grateful
Hmm.
than we are for them. They all tried to learn as best they can, but it was a learning curve. You know, we only
Yeah.
learned from okay, that didn't work. So we started
Right.
off giving Paige an index card that when she had a trigger, she could leave the classroom and just put the card down. She didn't have to get up and ask. She didn't have to draw attention to herself. So that way, if the teacher looked around and didn't see Paige but saw the card, she knew Paige was in the office or outside taking a walk.
Oh, that's
Hmm.
brilliant.
It
Yeah.
worked out. It worked out really good with
Yeah.
that. Then they were, gum chewing is a big trigger for Paige, and they tried passing a rule in the classroom, no gum chewing, but there's 30 kids in the classroom. Every time the teacher turned her back, kids are sneaking it in. And,
Right.
Yeah.
I can't expect them to be able to monitor 30 kids at the same time.
I guess they can't suspend everybody.
Right. It was,
But
and they're just kids. You know what I mean?
right,
They're
right.
just eighth grade kids. They're not trying to do anything. And Paige said it perfectly. Her teachers, unbeknownst to Paige, her teachers had emailed me that day because again, I said we got to do something different. Paige can't last like this. She's not going to make the school year if we don't help her. She's
Hmm.
not going to last. And her teachers said, we were wondering, would Paige ever consider telling the kids what she has so we can maybe make a plea to them That's when Paige called me from school, and I was talking to her on the phone, and I said, "What do you think we could do? Do you have any ideas?" And Paige, out of nowhere, said, "I think I should tell everybody." She said, "Because right now they think the no gum chewing is just a stupid rule the teachers made. But if I tell them why, it might mean more to them." And that was all Paige. That was all her idea.
Yeah.
And I said, "That's pretty funny because your teachers just sent me an email asking if you'd be up for that." And then Paige said, "Oh, yeah, absolutely."
So then it was game on, and
yeah, that's where she's like her mom. You tell Paige something's going to happen. It's like the organization of D-Day. Things start happening.
Great.
They even asked Paige at one point, "Do you want to speak to the individual classrooms?" And Paige said, "Oh, geez, I don't know. I don't want to do that. Can we just get everybody in the auditorium and do it all at once?"
Oh, so it was like an assembly kind of situation in the auditorium. Oh, wow. Cool.
I don't think Paige has that gene that tells her some people are afraid of public speaking. She has no fear, no hesitation, none.
So then what was the was the presentation just for this, or was it wrapped up in another assembly or something? Was it
no, it was just for this.
For you? Oh, wow.
The vice principal who handled the 504 was brilliant. What he did, they ran an awareness week. So it was Misophonia Awareness Week. So every day in the morning announcements, they would give facts about misophonia. And this is where Chris Edwards at So Quiet and I started talking. I said, "Hey, we have this opportunity for an awareness week in our school, but I don't, they're asking for facts and posters or something." Chris made us all kinds of stuff, helped out with the facts. And so they did daily announcements where they would give information about misophonia. They would have trivia contests in the lunchroom. They had posters in the hallways. And so that way, by the time Paige gave her speech, they'd already learned what it was. So then Paige wasn't just saying, "I have this thing called misophonia," and they don't know what it is. They already learned about it. And then they had like what was it, Paige, like 45-minute presentation?
It was our whole PE period, so probably it was 50 minutes of just the presentation. So
they played like a 7-minute version of the documentary Quiet Please.
Oh yeah, did you get permission from Jeff to do that, or did you just play it?
I think they just played.
Maybe it was just the trailer.
It was just a trailer. It was
trailer.
Trailer.
That's great.
And they had slides, and then at the end, Paige came up and Paige gave a speech. And I remember one of the things Paige said that really struck home. She said, "I don't have the right to tell you not to chew gum. I can't tell you what to do. That's not up to me. But I can tell you, if you make that decision, you'll be increasing my quality of life."
Right. Yeah.
So she left it up to them.
Right. Yeah, that's what. That's amazing. And what was the reaction?
It was pretty different for a while.
Yeah.
I had people coming up to me just saying that they loved it or whatever, and it was different for I'd say a couple weeks. But I mean, just with the gum chewing, I mean, it didn't really last too long. But I think it at least did something for the people who did care.
Yeah, and just the real
it plants
world
a seed
thing.
at least.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say,
sure.
even if it didn't do anything now, it plants a seed for when they're high school, college adults, I feel like. So, yeah.
And I try to use any opportunity I can to tell people about it, because that's what Paige wants. Paige has been pretty vocal about it. And just a real world example, while our daughter's doing this monumental thing, giving this, life-changing for her presentation, I'm a visual trigger to Paige, so I couldn't even be I had to stand under the bleachers behind her watching it.
Yeah.
But that's just a real world example of what this does to relationships and day-to-day activities. It's not just Dad can't chew gum or make a certain sound. It's all encompassing.
Right. No, that's what most people don't understand. They think that psychologist probably thinks, oh, it's just a concentration problem. It can't possibly affect an entire family or your entire trajectory of your work life, career, all your relationships. And that's an important message that I always try to get across. Why I do the podcast is, it has a lot of effects, and how it's affected your families. perfect example of that. Actually, speaking of family, what does your sister think, or where does she fit? Is she a trigger? What does she think?
Yeah, she's a trigger, but I'd be able to like see her eat.
Yeah.
I feel it's probably the same thing as my friends because I'm able to still most of the time be around my friends eating because it's not
Mm-hmm.
as bad because obviously it depends on the person. But I haven't really been willing to risk that, and I think it took her a little bit longer to understand in the beginning,
Right.
but now she's fully aware, and I don't have too many problems with her being a trigger.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. You said obviously depends on the person. It does depend on the person a lot. It's conundrum why exactly,
Yeah.
but honestly, it's kind of unfortunate why sometimes. But
Hmm.
We don't
yeah,
ask why anymore in this house.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's nothing. Well, as long as you know it's not personal, it's something
Yeah.
deep
No.
inside.
That was hard. That was hard for us
Yeah.
to handle. And Paige would have a lot of guilt about that, as I'm sure everybody knows. That was a big issue. And I read something that changed the way I dealt with it. I read something that it was the concept that you can affect the other person's reaction. You can affect the misophonic reaction by how you handle it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you give them a bunch of grief about it, they could have a stronger, more discomfort, more pain, more aggravation than if you find a way to say, I'm sorry that happened. I hope you know I didn't do anything on purpose. Let's talk when you feel better. Let me know if I can do anything. And
Hmm.
that's what we started doing. And I finally told Paige she would feel guilty sometimes, saying mean things. And I told her, of course, listen, just watch me in traffic. Everybody does that. But I told her, I said, Paige, for those 5 minutes, you weren't talking. Misophonia had the microphone. That wasn't you. I don't think of my daughter as saying that stuff. That wasn't you talking. You're good. You know, didn't bother me
Yeah.
in the slightest bit. So the less guilt Paige has, she can recover very, very quickly now.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely like a cycle of dysregulation. If we see and it kind of can escalate, and obviously makes everything worse, including the misophonia. So I'm glad that's great that you were able to recognize that. Um, and yeah, just try to keep things calm. Eventually it'll
Yeah.
come down.
Yeah, I would try to rationalize with her and try to like talk her down and calm her down, and it just made no sense. And I
Yeah.
realized you're talking to somebody who can't think straight. What are you doing? You know.
Um. So yeah, I would love to come back to the guilt and shame piece in a little bit, but I was also wanted to I want to go back to like before. I know, Paige, you're eighth grade going to ninth grade, but um,
Hmm.
before COVID, was there like a lot of situations with folks with misophonia, um, you know, a lot of us have had some kind of um, some experience as a child, which may have been difficult. Obviously, in this case, you're one happy family, and there's divorce and deaths in the family can kind of happen and kind of traumatize a child or a particularly dysregulated parent, alcoholic or whatnot. I don't
Hmm.
want to get too deep into
No,
sensitive
you're
stuff, but I'm
fine.
just curious if there was it could be a medical thing, if there was anything maybe during childhood that was maybe different. Let's just put it that
Um.
way.
No, not that I know of. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
no. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not that's and I've heard that before. It's just in a lot of cases there is something. There's definitely been a
Yeah.
few people or there hasn't really been anything of note. But yeah, it's happened enough that I just like to ask, just because other people might relate. Um,
Hmm.
Interesting. Okay. And so, actually, so going back to, I guess, advocacy and whatnot. Yeah, it's great you reached out to Chris. I think he also helped, or it's through, I think, Chris, and I'm on the board of So Quiet, that I found out, or it was on a Facebook that I found out about I think the Christmas sites or the Thanksgiving, stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I'm sorry, about what?
Was there like a fundraiser that you guys were doing?
Oh, the decorations.
Yes, decorations. Sorry.
Yeah, that again was Paige's.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear
Go
about
ahead,
that
Paige.
because it might give some people ideas.
Hmm. Well, my dad did,
Oh,
he does
Halloween,
like
I
a,
think it was.
yeah.
Yeah, we did it for Halloween, and then we did
Yeah,
it for Christmas as well. We kept it going through
gotcha.
Christmas as well.
Yeah.
Hmm. So he has like a projection show that he does for Halloween, and he put at the end, what did it say that you put? I actually don't remember.
It's a
Sorry.
full house video projection, so it's done on computers. I'm not doing a humble brag here. I'm just trying to explain to you that it stands out. It's really,
Yeah.
people look at it and wonder what the hell is that. So we get a lot of traffic. People that can see it from the road will come in, and so Paige said, because I was telling her a lot of people that have these um, houses that get a lot of crowds, they'll raise money for charities.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, we should do that for Misophonia. And so I said, okay, but just understand, if I put a sign outside that says we're raising money for dads who have very bad breath, people are going to know I have bad breath. I said, so if we put a sign outside saying we're raising money for Misophonia, people are going to know somebody in this house has Misophonia. And Paige said, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the video at the end, I made a video that said we were raising money for Misophonia, and it had a little, it was all animated, and it had a little thing at the end that Chris had set up. You could text to a number and donate, and then
Oh yeah.
for Christmas we did the same thing for Christmas, and then around Christmas time we put up a Santa North Pole mailbox that people could put cash donations in,
Oh, very
Hmm.
cool.
and we plan on doing that again this year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That sounds like a great idea. Were you able to obviously you were able to get some money, but I'm curious, were you able to find people who are like, oh, I have this, like, were you able to kind of like educate people who may not have known that they had it?
Every time it comes up, whether
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about, because on Facebook is a lot where we talk about things. If
Mm-hmm.
we post about Paige doing her assembly, or if we post about Paige doing the awareness week, or if we mention the decorations, Chris has called me the misophonia magnet, because somebody will come out of the woodwork and say, oh my gosh, I think I have this.
Yeah.
And that was the most, and Paige and I have talked about this a lot, that was the most impactful thing to me, besides my daughter having this, was the first thing I did was I went online and I found a Facebook group about it. And I said, as parents, what can, if you have this, as parents, tell us, what can we do to not make it worse? Because that was my fear, was
Mm-hmm.
that, is there anything, like, if you could look back and go, gee, I wish my parents hadn't done blah, 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 or I wish they had done blah, blah, blah. And I got, 100 different responses, people sending me messages. And one was an older woman in her 70s. She said, the best thing you can do is what you're doing, trying to educate yourself and just believing in your daughter. She said she hadn't spoken to her family in about 30 years, because when she was a kid, they told her she was overreacting, she was melodramatic, she was rude, and she lost contact with them for, I think she said, 30 years, until she read the article in the New York Times. And she said that was the first time she heard about misophonia, and she was able to call her family and say, look, I have a thing, this is what I have, this is what it's all been about. And she was able to speak to her family again after 30 years. And that floored me, that somebody's life could change that dramatically by increasing your vocabulary by one word.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And Paige has always, from day one, Paige has talked about, sorry, it's hard to, Paige and I were in a doctor appointment, and it wasn't even for misophonia. It was, I'm a dad. I don't know where the hell I go. I just go where my wife points. It was a dental appointment or a leg. I don't know where we were. But we were sitting in the waiting room, and I couldn't even sit next to Paige. I was about a chair away, and we were talking. And at this time, we hadn't even found a doctor for Paige yet. We
Mm.
hadn't found her help for misophonia. And I had an old high school friend who has grown up to be a brilliant woman. She's a neuroscientist, and I contacted her right away and asked her if she had any information. And she's been helpful to, like, help guide us through. Oh no, that's a sham. That won't work. Don't waste your time.
Yeah.
And I was telling Paige to give her some confidence. I said, Paige, just so you know, I said, this friend of mine, she's brilliant. She's one of the smartest women probably in the world, and she's on your team. She's going to be helping us through this. We'll get through it. And Paige said, oh, I'd like to do that. She's like, I think I'd be good at that. She's like, because then when I get older, if I learn the science stuff like that, I could help people because I have it, and I'll be able to understand exactly what they're dealing with. And it struck me that we hadn't even found her help yet, and she was already thinking about helping other people.
Yeah, and that's very powerful. Actually, I was going to get to that speaks to the high empathy that misophonia kind of gives a lot of misophones. It seems like a lot of misophones talk about, and I think that's one of our positive superpowers is maybe a little bit extra empathy, which I think everyone should have, but we definitely kind of seem to have it. A lot of us seem to have in spades. So that's great, Paige, that you're wanting to do that. Yeah, because I was going to ask, you're going into high school, but have you thought about, career arcs and kind of what you like to do? You don't have to have obviously anything specific. You're still young. You should kind of have your doors open as much as possible. But it sounds like you're already thinking a little bit about studying more the science of misophonia.
I definitely, like, at first I was kind of thinking about what if I was just like a doctor or a therapist who talks with people, but I want to be able to do something and maybe talk to more people and not just have clients, maybe get the word out more than I would like in an office. I don't really know.
I think you could probably do both. I mean, once you're an adult, you hopefully have more resources financially to have to spin up other projects and get other people to help you do that. It sounds like your mom's very good at getting things done too. I'm sure you'll probably get that trade. You're getting that trade as well. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't limit yourself. I think there's probably a lot of different ways you can help out.
Yeah. I just don't know for sure what. I just know I want to do something to get it out.
Yeah, no, that's great, and we'll definitely the Misophonia world will appreciate anything and everything. I guess, I mean, maybe day to day, like when you're going out in the world, I guess, maybe coping coping methods. Like this summer, like what are you doing when you go out into the world? Are kind of earbuds, noise canceling stuff kind of your go-to, or is it just avoiding people at large?
Yeah, all my friends know. So if there is a problem, they know if I need to take a break or something or sit somewhere else. So usually I'm good about, they'll like let me pick where I want to sit if we go somewhere or ask if things are okay. So usually I don't really have problems, and most of the time during summer I'm just with my friends most of the time. So I haven't really noticed too many problems. And then if there is someone chewing gum or something, there's times where I'll switch spots with someone so I can be further away or just leave.
Or you can stare them down like you did the one kid.
The glare.
Yeah.
In movie theaters and stuff, probably avoid.
We figured that out.
Yeah.
So we that was one of the things, like, we used to go to movies, and I thought, in the beginning of this, you mourn the things that aren't going to happen anymore. I found myself going down that road. Oh my gosh, I'll never be sitting next to my daughter in a movie theater again. We're not going to share popcorn. We're not going to be doing this or doing that. And I realized that's just stupid. There's a lot of people in the world that have a lot worse going on, and they make their lives work. If the worst thing I have to do in my life is eat 10 feet to the left of my kid, I'm doing okay. So when Paige asked me on her own, hey, would you want to go see a movie this, tomorrow or something? You can prepaid tickets. You book your seats.
Right.
So I bought a seat for Paige. I bought the 2 or 3 seats in between us.
I bought forgot one for about me. That. Yeah.
And, so I bought like 4 or 5 extra seats. So we had a blocked out area, and then we get the hearing impaired headset. So Paige can put that on, and she hears the audio. Yeah. She can wear her own headphones and just plug into the wireless thing. So she hears it in the headphones and doesn't have to hear anybody else around her.
Yeah. I've tried those headphones in a theater once that it sounded kind of odd to me, but maybe I had a bad one. You
might have had a bad one, because the one she had was shocking. It was indistinguishable. Wow, there was no delay. Cool. Yeah, you could sit there and take it on and off your ear, and you couldn't tell. Paige and I had a conversation around Thanksgiving. our entire extended family knows, and they've just been phenomenal. And we had Thanksgiving at my parents' house with cousins, aunts, nephews, and anytime we go somewhere, we always have an escape plan. Paige, just let me know when you're ready to go. So we drive separately, and we left on Thanksgiving, and Paige and I had a conversation in the car, and when I mentioned it online, people had a pretty strong reaction to it. And Paige, do you remember what you had said when we left? Do you know what I'm talking about?
That like my main goal wasn't to be.
Yeah, you said you felt better when you heard me. When you heard your mom and I talk to the doctors about that.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, she said when we got in the car, oh, go ahead.
No, I remember. Yeah, I remember saying that. I remember the work that we were doing with my doctors was all focused around being at the dinner table, being around people eating, and being able to go back to that normal. But that's when I kind of realized that's not my main goal in the work that we were doing. It just didn't feel like necessary to want to go back to the table, because even if I did, I knew I was going to be stressed. I knew it was never going to be the same. And there's so many like other ways I can still be involved, and I just think that's kind of what I realized.
And I didn't know Paige was thinking that. I was thinking that, and it meant a lot when Paige said that in the car, that she said it, because I think that might help other parents if they know because a lot of the therapists were trying to say that was our goal. The goal is get Paige back to the dinner table. And I finally said, that's not our goal. That's not going to be a goal, because at best, she'll white knuckle it for me and my wife. She'll do it to make us happy. She's never going to be happy or calm or relaxed at the dinner table. That's just not going to happen right now. So why would we force her to do that? It makes no sense to me. And I said, it's just a habit.
Right.
And what I finally explained was, okay, so you're saying, well, it's a tradition. It's a family thing. It's a bonding moment. I said, okay, well, the biggest family dinner of the year is Thanksgiving. That's the one everybody's got to have the family together. That's the big one. Everybody's got to be together on Thanksgiving. If it's so important, why does half the country have their children at a kid's table? I grew up eating at a kid's table. I ate separately from my parents on Thanksgiving, and it didn't faze me. So if my daughter's got to eat at a separate table, who cares?
Yep. All these things should be questioned. And as we've established, that psychologist has no idea what they're talking about, or is just kind of like so focused on, just can't think outside of the box. You're right. There is no reason why you can't bond without sitting around this one piece of wood on
right. I have to consume protein within a 10 square foot circle of my child to make my life complete. I don't think so. Going to a movie theater, that was the big thing when Paige and I went, with just the two of us. She said, yeah, but you're not going to be able to eat anything. And, I'm not exactly petite. So I said, Paige, do you think I'm going to miss it? I watched a movie last night at home. I didn't make a 50-gallon bag of popcorn and suck down a 2-liter of pop. Right. I'm capable of watching an hour and a half of entertainment without consuming 6,000 calories. I can make this happen. It's a habit. It's just something you associate with it. So when I go to the theater, I just don't get anything. Even if I'm behind her, because I don't want her to have that stress that she might look over and see something. It's not that big of a deal.
Actually, Paige, it sounds like misokinesia, the visual triggers are a big deal then with you as well. Did that come around the same time? Did it come on a bit later?
I think it was around the same time, because I remember the same things I would be hearing with my mom when it first started, the way she would eat. I remember we were at the table and would always make fun of her for having something in the corner of her mouth. And that would bother me. I remember that. Like mustard.
Now the whole world knows.
Well, we said early on we were going to make this very nonchalant with misophonia. My wife and I had a conversation about that. We said it's not going to be, oh, Paige has misophonia. It's going to be, Paige has misophonia.
Yep.
I told her it's no different than a cat allergy. If you walked into a room where a bunch of people were petting cats and you said, oh, I'm allergic to cats, they would instantly put the cats away and nobody would think twice about it. So if you walk into a room and say, I have misophonia, people should understand what that is someday when they learn about it, and you have no reason to feel any different.
I think it feels so like isolating because no one does know what it is.
Yeah, we're in those early days right now, and that's
Mm-hmm.
great what you said, Mike. I mean, yeah, like de-shaming it, like is huge. Apart from it goes to something you said earlier about just feeling guilty about it. People feel guilty about it because, well, initially nobody else knows about it, so we just immediately uh, blame ourselves. But if you take it to the next level, if once people are educated, if you can treat it nonchalantly, it is what it is, and we're trying to do the best we can. That helps misophones a lot because it reduces that feeling of feeling threatened, which is what ignites the fight or flight. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's a great approach.
There was a time where she was worried about telling friends about it, and I said,
Mm,
would you had no problem telling them when you hurt your ankle, or if you had the flu, or if you had a headache? It's a physical ailment. It's no different
right,
than an allergy. It's an involuntary physical response to stimuli. Period. No different than a cat
right,
rubbing on you and getting hives.
right, right. Well, yeah, no, that's very true. Yeah, we're coming up to an hour.
Oh, geez, sorry.
I no, no, no. This is like I said, it's totally it's so we just kind of go with the flow. But yeah, I did want to. I don't know. Yeah, I wanted to give you all a chance since you've thought about this a lot and are great advocates. Anything else you want to kind of share with people, parents, maybe families especially, because I don't get this the opportunity to talk to as many families about so many different dimensions of misophonia. Is there anything that you'd like to share? Maybe maybe we'll start with Michael or Kelly. If I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you'd like to say something, that's great. But maybe starting with Michael, and then we'll end with Paige.
When we first found out about it, I started kind of obsessing about reading about it and learning about it, trying to
Yeah.
educate myself. And it became very depressing for me
Hmm.
because I was reading articles that were written 10, 15. One of the first articles I found was 7 terrifying things to learn about misophonia. Probably not the best way to start my
That's part of our
introduction to
modern
misophonia.
sensationalist world. You'll see a
Exactly.
lot of
It
that.
was clickbait.
Yeah.
And it really had me scared to death for Paige's future and what, life's going to be. And um, I finally had to just change my mindset that it's not that big of a deal. Paige is dealing with it every day. All I got to do is, support her. And, my wife, and I talk about this constantly. It doesn't matter what we feel. It doesn't matter what we think. It's Paige's reality. I don't have to understand it. I don't have to know how it works. We just go by what Paige says. So if Paige says XYZ isn't working, we don't do XYZ. And um, it was hard to like mourn not having dinners at the table at
Hmm.
first. It's hard for me to like get in that mindset now because for a while there I was really sad about we'll never have dinners, we'll never sit side by side in a movie theater, we'll never. And then I just realized that's silly. It's just silly. There are people out there with much greater impacts on their lives, and they're living just fine. They're doing wonderful things and they get along just fine. This is just it's a transition. It's just an adjustment for us, you
Right.
know. And so Paige is besides the misophonia, Paige is healthy, happy. She has friends. We can talk to her. She's funny. So I can't eat within 10 feet of her. Okay,
Hmm.
I'm good with that.
That's your normal, and so yeah, you just kind of
Yeah, and that's the thing. There is no
work
normal.
around it.
It's
Yeah.
just you know it just is. It just is what it is. My dad has always taught me that since I was a kid. It is what it is.
Hmm.
You can't worry about how you got somewhere or why you got somewhere. Accept the fact you're here now and deal with it moving forward.
Right. With that exposure therapy.
Exactly.
um, Kelly, did you want to add anything?
When this all first started, since we really didn't know what was going on, we didn't know if it was, Paige is just hormonal and God, is she in a mood? And, so we didn't know if it was more of like not discipline, but, more so just like her mood. Knowing what we know now in learning everything, people often ask, how's Paige doing? Is she better? I said, well, she's always going to have this. There's no cure yet. So we have learned to accommodate and adapt. So our life is better now. But I think a big takeaway, something that Mike had mentioned to help me understand, where 6 months ago or a year ago, I would try to rationalize and put logic into my responses, and I would banter back and forth with Paige, forgetting that she is not rational at that time. But in my head, I'm thinking, well, how does she not understand this? Where knowing now what we know, we are able to separate. Okay, that's misophonic Paige, and there's normal Paige. So when she's in a trigger state of mind, I just completely shut down, ignore her, stop talking, don't engage in any way. She gets over it so much quicker. Whereas before, we would go back and forth, and it would make it so much worse. So being able to kind of break it down and just know that if I don't engage, if I don't let this bother me, it's going to be much better in the end.
That is a hugely important takeaway, and I think that applies to more than just misophonia. When you're a parent, some things are not rational. Some things are purely instantaneously emotional, maybe rooted into some other process in the body that we don't understand yet. So if you can just kind of not escalate and go through that cycle of that spiral, things can work out. Yeah, that's huge. Thanks. And finally, Paige, anything, any last thoughts you want to share with people?
I think just not feeling guilty for either like how you react or what goes on when you are triggered. Because I think that's pretty important.
No, that's key. A lot of people come on and talk about the guilt and the shame, and for a lot of people, it goes on for decades. Like you're like that woman who's 70 now. I've had other people come on, so yeah, that's an important lesson, is to try to maybe connect with other people who have it, or find a way to get over that, or try to not just get over, but just try to focus on that guilt and shame, and be aware of it, and try to keep that under control. Yeah, well, thanks, Hesser family, Michael, Kelly, and Paige. Thanks for coming on. I was excited to talk, and thanks for everything you do in the community. And doing the podcast, I know that how much advocacy helps, and so it's great to hear that people are responding to what you do.
Yeah, we're actually in the middle of Misophonia Awareness Month here in our town. Forgot about that.
Great.
Yeah,
what town are you in?
Manhattan, Illinois.
Okay, yeah, I thought you were in Illinois. Cool.
Yeah. Our mayor heard about Paige and contacted me and said he'd like to set that up.
Oh yes, okay, that's amazing. Well, this is how it starts, and then soon Paige will be president, and we'll have misophonia under control for the entire country.
And I'll have to move to Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you again, Hesser family. I'm excited for more advocacy projects that I hope will inspire others around the country. Also, I wish Paige the best as high school gets started. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. You can hit me up by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or go to the website, misophoniapodcast.com. It's usually easiest just to send a message on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. On Twitter or X, it is Misophonia Show. Support the show by visiting the Patreon at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. The music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.